Hello, it's Virtual Newsmakers, and we have a special guest today, Stephanie J. Castillo, and she is a documentary filmmaker and an Emmy winner, I might add. Her latest project is the Thomas Chapin Nightbird Song, and it is a documentary about a jazz virtuoso who had bridged the traditional jazz to the avant-garde in his sound. And Stephanie and I met on a platform called Stage 32. She's been filmmaking for many years now. This is her 10th documentary film, and we wanted to get her on the show to find out a little bit more about her and her projects, and also how she is using technology to work on her projects and how it's helped shape what she's doing now compared to what she's done years ago. So, Stephanie, let's turn the mic over to you. And you have a background in broadcasting. So how did you get into filmmaking?
Well, it was always my dream to make school where my dad was. He subscribed to Newsweek, Time Magazine, Sports Illustrated. So I think I follow after him in my curiosity about the news and about the world. And I don't recall exactly when I decided I wanted to make documentaries. Probably was in the, I'd say, 70s. I started thinking about film. I had a friend who would take me to the movies and show me classic films that I had never seen, you know, Citizen Kane, Fellini, Truffaut, and I started to get very interested in film, but somehow I didn't want to go with Hollywood. I saw Hollywood as, I was living in Hollywood at the time, and I just saw Hollywood as a far too big for the dreams that I had at that time. So I decided I wanted to make documentaries because I was fascinated by the world, and so I went to college and took some film courses, but I ended up graduating with a degree in journalism. And then I was going to go to film school and got turned down. And the only opening that summer was a job as a news reporter. So I took that, did it for 5 years, and decided I wasn't going to do anything but focus on becoming a good reporter, which I did for 5 years. But at the end of 5 years, my dream to make documentaries came back, and I was going to try again for film school when a friend said, "Don't bother, just make a film." He had gone to film school, so he knew what I would get and what I had gotten as a news reporter. With an idea to make film.
Wow.
So that's what I did.
Well, there's no better school than the School of Hard Knocks. What do you think that that you learned through the practicality of it?
Absolutely.
Just in terms of, you know, we go to school and we learn a lot of theory. Yeah.
There seems to be a bit of a delay.
Yeah, there is.
Well, you know, when you spend 5 years as a newspaper reporter, which I did, I was with the Honolulu Star Bulletin, and they sent me to Maui, and I covered Maui County, which was 3 different islands, and then I was sent to USA Today, and they were only 5 years old at the time, leading the world in digitized newspapering, as well as color newspapering, and writing shorter stories and using bullet points. So my background as a newspaper reporter really came into play when I decided, you know, to make my first film. I was really proud of not the traditional style of documentary, but to open myself up to a form that was natural to me and my background, and was not a copy of anybody's form, including Ken Burns, because Ken Burns had not yet made his documentary series, The Civil War.
Uh-huh.
I was before Ken Burns, before they named that there's a tool in Final Cut Pro named after Ken Burns, which I laugh about because I was doing that move before Ken Burns.
Okay.
But
what is the tool
anyway,
called?
For 5 years, I was called the Ken Burns. It's just it's a verb.
Wow.
Do the Ken Burns, or Ken Burns on this. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like I was doing it, and he's so lucky to have it named after him, but it's already invented. So anyway, when as I was making this film, it took me 5 years to make this film, and I had to raise $500,000, and this is what I want to come back to in terms of how I raised the money, because back then it was very different.
Mm-hmm.
And I finished the film in 5 years with Hawaii Public Television, and it won an Emmy Award the next year, my first documentary film.
Tell us about the
I'm
first
very proud of it. I'm still very...
What was the...
Well, it was about... The subject?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a documentary about the leprosy epidemic in Hawaii, late 1900s. I'm sorry, late 1800s, 19th century.
Oh, wow.
And the intervention by Father Damien, who's a Belgian missionary priest at the time, and I used that epidemic to look back 100 years to ask how are we going to deal with the AIDS epidemic, because of very similar epidemics. And my question was, what have we learned in 100 years? How are we going to do the AIDS differently? And I used the leprosy epidemic's history, 100 years of history, to ask that question, like, what are we going to do differently? Are we going to isolate like we did 100 years ago? How far have we really come?
That's really...
That documentary, I suppose today...
the delay is a little bit difficult for us to...
I'm sorry.
We're having a little bit of a delay.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But what I love about the idea of doing a documentary, not just to tell the narrative story of something that happened in the past, but to ask that really important question of, like, that comparative approach, what are we going to do differently today? And I think that if more kids and students were educated with that main question in mind, we're not just studying the historic narrative right out of a book, but you're learning how others coped with or handled or dealt with problematic situations in order to solve future problems. And that is really powerful. I actually really love that idea.
I think that's why it won an Emmy, because it didn't just do the narrative, it asked the question. It made the comparisons, but I did the comparisons, it's not like this and this and this and this and compare like that. What I did is I spent the first 45 minutes telling the story of the epidemic.
Okay.
Without even mentioning the word AIDS. Seeing light bulbs to go off in your head as I was telling the story, so that your head was going, oh gosh, we're doing that again.
Yeah.
Oh dear, we're going down the same road. And then in the last 10 minutes, I bring in the AIDS epidemic. and
Oh,
make the parallels. But by then, people were already into the parallels and understanding why it wouldn't be good to banish, people with AIDS to a peninsula like these people were. At them, I just had to put the two together, and I saw when the question floor of Congress, people in the audience were shaking their heads
Hmm.
like, not, oh no, not again. And they got the message without me preaching at them.
well, and that the whole message is how do we keep history from repeating itself? And
Absolutely.
the beauty of documentary to be able to really handle that is that we have a history of storytelling as human beings that goes all the way back to caveman, and that the whole matrilineal storytelling and prior to writing, and then the writing, and then the printing press, and there's this whole history, and then photography started to be able to capture images, and then film started to be able to catch it in motion. And so we've had this incredible history of how communications have evolved. But with the advent of film and documentary, we can actually layer, you as a filmmaker can layer that past point of view and that perspective into today's reality. And I don't think that that has ever, I don't think that that vantage point or perspective existed before something like, say, documentary film in the same way. What are we doing? Here's what happened. Here's, so this is actually brilliant. I never really thought about it in that way.
No, thank you. In some ways, today the most popular form of documentary films, where I'd say 90% of the funding is going today with documentary films, are documentary films with social causes, films that talk about a cause in the world. And so in a way, mine was a social cause documentary. I was speaking into the AIDS epidemic. That was 30 years ago, so without
Yeah.
knowing, I mean, without labeling a social cause documentary, a social issue documentary, that's what I made. And I think
Right.
a lot of that does come out of my journalism background, in that I could see that way. But I also think, as a filmmaker, my background, in which my mother did not read to me or read to us as children.
Huh.
So I grew up watching movies. She'd
Yeah.
take us to the movies.
Same
And
here.
I think what happened was my learning of literature became visual. Okay, because she was not reading to us. She was taking us to the movies. We were watching TV. And I think so my visual literacy is very strong because I was raised much like the kids today are being raised. Okay, you
I'm
have to
so
speak.
glad you said that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to speak to kids today. When you speak to kids, you have to talk in terms of the visual, because that's how they've grown up ever since Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Sesame Street taught them the power of putting the visual and the words together. And so, I think that my background assisted me, and these young people growing up today with visual literacy, are going to make amazing films.
Yeah.
And this is their medium now. This is the way that young people express themselves, whether it's through the internet or making short films or making, long forms. That the young people of today, this is their language. This is when they can take this medium and go someplace with it. And it's very exciting to watch what young people do with this medium.
My father has been working with my daughter, who's 7, to help use some of these tools to teach her how to make videos, and she's learning. They're all into Minecraft now, but she's learning how to play Minecraft by watching other kids' videos. So it's a learning mechanism now, as well as they teach each other.
Yep.
And I think it's massively, hopefully, going to change the educational system. And I love what you're saying in terms of visual literacy, because I think, as a culture, tend to focus on reading as the only type of literacy, and really literacy from a storytelling standpoint, I think is really, it's mind-boggling, the possibilities. So I watch them at a very young age getting into that, and that is their language. And thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. But let me add that I'm not against reading. I think
Me neither.
children should learn to read, because that's where so much of the information is before their day was written information.
Right.
So when I do my films, I have to go back and read, a great deal of research. And so you want both skills. You want to be able to read and analyze and see what's there on the page. And then from there you process that to create the visual. But you can't, obviously you could make a film without ever reading a book. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if you want to make powerful films that have context, that have history and background. And, I had a professor in junior college, in community college. He taught world civilizations. And I credit him more than any other teacher, and there have been numerous teachers that I've credited for helping me become the filmmaker that I am. But this one taught me a really important lesson. He said, history is multi-causal. There are more causes to a history story than just one thing. So when I made my film Simple Courage about the leprosy epidemic, I said, I'm going to look at this epidemic from its multi-causes. What caused this ban almost 9,000 people? Well, I looked at it through public health and what was going on at the time. I looked at it through medicine and what was going on at the time with the discovery of the bacillus. I looked at it through the social situation in Hawaii at the time. I looked at it through the history of the Hawaiians. I looked at it in many different vantage points, asking the question, how did this cause this epidemic? How did this cause this epidemic? And so there was dimension, intellectual dimension to my film.
Yeah.
And it took your attention to watch this film. I had a friend say, oh, I got my pillow and my popcorn, and I was going to watch your film on TV when it came out, and I couldn't eat and I couldn't lay down. I was fixed
Wow.
to your storytelling, So that's what we want. Powerful storytelling.
So Stephanie, when you mentioned earlier the fundraising aspect for film. That's huge. It's hard to get a film off the ground without money. But how has it changed from that first film to this last film?
Well, I think there's several factors. When I made this first film, which was in the late 80s, there was no internet. There were no mini device cameras. There were no flip cameras. There were no GoPro cameras. There was a lot of technology that just did not exist. All the cameras were big and heavy, and you needed a guy to pick it up because it was so heavy. And there were a few women camera people in my day, but they were few. They were not the majority. Where today, anybody can pick up a camera. So that's one thing was the technology then had not reached a point where it was convenient for you to pick up a camera and start shooting. So I had to hire crews, film crews, and I was working with Hawaii Public Television, so they would provide me crews, which saved me money. That was their pro bono contribution to my film. The other thing was there was no crowdfunding, which is one of the primary ways in which people raise monies today for their films. So what did I do? Well, the first thing that I did was I saw a magazine on the newsstand called Hawaii Business News, and it listed the top 100 corporations in Hawaii. And I thought, well, I'll just write them all and tell them what I'm doing. And I wrote them all a letter, put a stamp on that envelope, and dropped it in the mail. That was how I began fundraising for my film. And I got one reply. Sorry, we don't fund films. And that was the Bank of Hawaii, you know. And but yeah, I got one reply, so I thought to myself, well, that didn't work. So then the next thing was pick up the telephone. You know, what technology did we have 30 years ago?
Yeah.
And so it was the telephone, making phone calls. And then pretty soon I began to understand the way money happens in Hawaii, which is a very different place from every other place. And I learned that there was this quote-unquote big boys network. That the corporations are connected to each other through their CEOs, you know, through their board of directors. It's a very small state. So I began to look at how do I reach these corporations and their, you know, their board of directors and make a request that way. So fundraising for me was a vertical learning curve. Okay, I really knew nothing, and this is fundraising as I was discovering it, as I was creating it, and I raised $500,000.
Wow!
In 3 years. So obviously, I did learn something in that period of learning about fundraising, and I think my most brilliant move in fundraising for this film was I went to our state legislature, hired a lobbyist, because I was still sort of like, I'm a newspaper reporter, I'm not supposed to lobby. You know?
Okay.
I wanted to maintain my integrity as a newspaper reporter, and so I hired a lobbyist, and she went and pitched the state legislature. She reached half of them, including the money committees, the governor, the state health department. And what I did with public television was I created a trailer, a 12-minute trailer, and I had nothing except for one shoot that we did. I had nothing to make a trailer with other than photographs, a photo of my script, you know, and she went around and showed that trailer to the legislature by saying to them, and I said to her, look, they're not going to want a piece of paper. Everybody gives them a piece of paper.
Yeah.
You have a videotape. We'd like to show this to you. We'll bring in the machine. You have your lunch, and while you're having your lunch, you can watch this. It's only 12 minutes long. And that's how we got $200,000 of that $500,000 from the Hawaii State Legislature, which is something you can not do today. The most they give is $50,000 if you can get that, but mostly it's $10,000. So the days in which I was doing this were really, you know, very special, unique days. And today is a different day. You've got Kickstarter, you've got Indiegogo and other fundraising, and now you've got, I just saw an advertisement, somebody sent me an email saying, are you interested in raising, what do they call that, like venture capital? Yeah. Are you using crowdfunding to raise venture capital? It's like, wow, this is like a new direction that crowdfunding is going in. Because you know, fundraising for a documentary is different than fundraising for a feature film, a narrative feature film. In narrative feature films, you get investors.
Yeah.
With a documentary, you get supporters, donations. You give people a tax write-off for their donation. And in the world of making movies or narrative films, you get investors who you promise to return money to. Whereas the documentary filmers don't promise anything other than to put your name on the film, to thank you for your contribution. And maybe some of them promise them even a copy of the film. But there's no return on investment for documentaries. So crowdfunding is a great tool for us today, and I use crowdfunding for the first time in 2013 to begin the project on Thomas Chapin, the jazz film. I used that. I heard people talking about it, and I went and looked it up, and I studied it for 1 year. I read about it. I joined crowdfunding ventures and gave money to others so I could see how the thing worked. And then in a year, I launched my own crowdfunder, set my goal, which is an important, how much money do you want to raise, a question. And my sense was, well, I'm going to just get this project started. I want to finish it within 5 years at the most. And so I need money right away. I can't, what I didn't want to do, which I had done with my other 9 projects, was to raise money, make the film. Raise money, make some more of the film. Raise money, make some more of the film. Raise money, finish the film. Okay? So it was, you couldn't make a film and go straight ahead. You had to stop and raise money. I wanted to avoid that as well. So when I said that to myself, I don't want to spend all my time raising money. I want to spend my time making the film. Then it was, okay, what's your goal then for how much money do you need to raise? And I looked at that question. I said, well, I'm sure I could raise $20,000, but that's not going to get me very far. I could raise $30,000, $40,000, but that's not going to get me to where I need to get. And so I said, I need $50,000. And it was kind of like, oh, shocking. You need $50,000, like just with a snap.
Right.
And I said, what if I could raise $50,000 in 45 days? Would I take the shot? And I said yes, because if I could take this shot and make it happen, and I thought I could because of Thomas's connections to the world, then I would be on my way to making the film in just a few months, as opposed to spending 9 months to a year raising money. So that's what I did. I just took the shot, and I raised $50,000 in 45 days.
And what crowdfunding source did you use, or platform rather?
That's a good question. I used Kickstarter.
Okay.
You know, Indiegogo was available, but it wasn't as well known at the time as Kickstarter. So one thing I wanted is to take advantage of their brand. Okay.
Yeah.
But after Kickstarter, after a while, after I finished my Kickstarter, which was, by the way, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. It was a tumultuous roller coaster ride emotionally, and I almost quit several times in the process. But when I looked at
Tell me why that was an emotional roller coaster ride.
Because you want to kill your friends. You want to kill them for not coming and supporting you. You know, like, why isn't so-and-so? Why isn't so-and-so coming? Why isn't so-and-so coming? You know, and you want to pick up the phone.
So don't expect your friends to come in and be your friends. But so then what was your response at that point? I mean, so you had to find people who would support you because they had a common belief or a certain affinity for what you were doing in terms of jazz, or?
Well, well, that was an interesting thing. Speaking of people with a background or that are interested, the community didn't come
Wow.
to my Kickstarter. That was shocking. I had, and that was another one that was like, why don't they come? Why aren't the jazz people coming? And I learned, I spent like $2,500 in ads, placing ads on their jazz websites, buying ads, in jazz bloggers, and they didn't show up. Who showed up were Thomas's fellow musicians, fan,
Ah.
fans, Thomas's family, Thomas's friends, people who loved him, who played with him. My sister was, my sister was his wife. Her friends came. My friends came. A lot of my friends came. Not all of my friends came. And so in the process of doing Kickstarter, I really had to deal with myself. And
Okay.
I had to deal with my emotions and my expectations and like why isn't God helping me? That kind of
Yeah.
thinking. And when I was done with the Kickstarter, I wrote a blog, okay, and about crowdfunding and this particular experience. And in it, I wrote about my experience and how tumultuous it was, and how my expectations were really causing me a lot of emotional turmoil. And then I wrote down the 10 commandments of crowdfunding.
Huh.
So that anybody that was going to do a crowdfunder, I tell them, hey, go to my blog, read my blog. You can see what my experience is, and then you can read the 10 commandments. What I think
That's
is.
great.
And then somebody wrote a book on crowdfunding recently in the last couple of years, and they took that idea, the 10 commandments of crowdfunding, and they've now used that, the
Nice.
guidelines, the goals. So, but I wanted to say, why Kickstarter and not Indiegogo? I don't think that I would have been able to know the difference had I not gone through the Kickstarter experience.
Uh-huh.
But the difference is Kickstarter is a game.
Okay.
People like to play games. They like to be challenged. If they're gamblers, they like that aspect of it. It's like all or nothing.
Yeah.
I raise 50,000 or I get nothing. And some people like that challenge. So Kickstarter turns your crowdfunding into a game that people love to play and get behind, and you get your cheerleaders behind you, and you get your supporters behind you, and you're trying to climb this mountain. Whereas Indiegogo is asking people to give, period. And
That's great. Okay.
there is no challenge, okay? But they do take 9%. Or it takes 5%. Indiegogo takes 9% if you don't meet your goal.
Right.
And I find, if I want to raise 50,000 and only raise 20, and I pay 9% to take the 20, that's okay. But for me, it's like, it wasn't good enough. To me, it's like, do what you say you're going to do.
I have to say, Stephanie, that after hearing you go through the fundraising aspect of getting a documentary off the ground, I'm totally exhausted just hearing it. How the hell do you get the strength to actually make the documentary after all that work?
Yeah, it was. Well, I had to take a week off. My mind was blown, and I was exhausted. It was like a full-time job.
Yeah.
Wow.
You're on it all the time, trying to get people to respond, and you reach points in the fundraising where there's nothing happening for 5 days or 6 days. That's enough to drive you crazy. Also, that nothing's coming in, and you have to figure out how to get over the doldrums and get the thing moving again. So it is a lot of work. I think Indiegogo is also, but to me, it's not the challenge that I think people like. And I've seen so many Indiegogo campaigns fail because
they were missing that secret spice of the challenge
I think so.
and the game. Yeah.
And
But
the
that's-
perseverance to
Yeah.
follow it through, because when you feel that
Right.
way, most people would give up.
Mm.
Well, I've even had people go on Indiegogo and they didn't do anything other than put the page up and wait people to come to them, and they
Yeah,
failed.
that doesn't work at all. Yeah.
No, you
that
have
doesn't
to
work.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Huh.
that is the big fundraising thing today, is to raise money that way. But I noticed that the word's gotten out that it's very hard to do. So a lot of people aren't going to do it because it's so, now that everybody knows how much work it is,
Right.
and that it is like a full-time job, and you have to have a team and a strategy and all that. It's a lot of work. So I think
Yeah.
people are looking at other ways to raise money, fundraising parties. I've done a few of those, fundraising parties. You don't raise a lot of money, but it's good for promoting your film.
Mm.
And other people are going to film festivals. They bring their rough cuts and try to find distributors. So the world of fundraising today is vastly different and is far more diverse than it was when I first started.
Well, what do you think about companies like Netflix and Amazon.com and whatnot, actually HBO and all these companies funding these types of documentaries and things like that? I mean, is that something it's another avenue or not?
Well, this is where I am right now, Cynthia. This is exactly the point of where I am, and learning about distribution platforms, and learning about selling your film. Okay, for the first 9 films, I was making films for public television, USA,
Right.
and now I've gone outside of PBS, and now I'm trying to sell my film to TV and cable TV, to international markets as well as U.S. markets, because it is a whole different game, and I'm just learning it now. Just learning it. I went to the film market in Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival. They have a market, and in May, and I went to that with my co-producer, and I started to learn about how does one get money for film. So what I learned is, and I'm still learning, I'm not done learning, is that there are several ways to get to that point, to the release of your film and how it is released. And Debbie, Stage 32, just yesterday offered a webinar on this.
Oh, wow.
How to release your film, the strategy. And I bought that. I'm listening to it now because I am on a learning curve with that. So that's also very helpful. But it is far more complicated outside of PBS to say I want to sell my film to the world.
Right.
And Cannes is only one of about 7 or 8 film markets in the world. And what a film market is distributors and film reps and sales agents go there looking for product to buy. And you hope they buy yours or they're interested in yours. And there's different ways to be at the market. I have a finished film. And at the Cannes film market, I connected with, there's hundreds of distributors, hundreds of sales reps at Cannes. It's mind-boggling how large the world of selling and buying films is. Okay, and you go to a place like Cannes, and it really is mind-boggling. It's like, I'm one of hundreds of thousands of films. How do I get the attention? And it happens that we were called. You have to register to go to Cannes.
Yeah.
And so I registered, and everybody who's registered can see who's registered. Producers can see, reps, sales reps and sales agents. So I started getting phone calls after I registered. Oh, we'd like to meet with you.
Oh,
wow.
It's awesome.
So we had 4 phone calls come in before we even got to Cannes.
Who's calling you? Like, who are the types of people that are calling you?
Well, I had 2 lawyers call me. Okay, lawyers are important because you deal with contracts and you deal with rights clearances and things. So you're interested in talking to some lawyers. But I had 2 lawyers call me. I had not a distribution company, but a sales rep. They sell and buy films.
Okay.
And I had let's see. Yeah, and there was a domestic, a U.S. distribution or sales rep company. So sales reps are different from the distributors, okay? Sales reps sell to distributors. So
they're the middleman, right? They're like the middleman.
They were calling me to say, we're interested in your film. Would you give us the right to distribute your film? Not distribute, but to sell your film on the international markets. So when I went to, and I'm just learning all this, you know, Cynthia, this is all new.
No, this is brilliant because nobody teaches this. I mean, I don't know. You have an opportunity right there, or all this that you're learning. It's almost like you talked about it before, that boys network that keeps everything, you know, sort of amongst themselves. Right. Well, unless we've got people like you who are forging the way for other independents who want to make their projects happen or see their projects happen, then it stays within this sort of, you know, their golf club or whatever, right? You know, like whatever their deal, whatever their little organization is.
Right.
And so I would urge you to consider another way of funding your films through coaching others to do this, to be able to do this too. And I have a young lady who's trying to start her own independent documentary company dealing with, she's a colleague of mine, but dealing with marine biology, that would probably love to learn from you. You know?
I'm still learning.
Those are the best teachers. The best teachers are the ones that are still learning.
I'm still learning like I was 30 years ago when I picked up, you know, that magazine and wrote letters.
Yeah, but you're 30 years ahead of her.
Well, maybe. I mean, things move faster today than back then. But I would like to share this. I'm just sharing it with you guys as what I'm going through right now.
Yeah.
Maybe when I've succeeded and getting my film out there, I might think about your suggestion, you know. But right now, I still feel like a neophyte. And there are other people who have done this and who've gone before me who know the ropes. In fact, I'm meeting with one on Monday, okay. This is a filmmaker who's gone down this road, okay. So he's going to meet with me and my co-producer, and I'm going to ask, okay, I've got these 4 companies who want my film, and they're offering this, this, and this, and this, this, and this. What would you do? And he's going to teach me how to make that decision.
Yeah.
Nice. Which I've never made and need to make. So I'm still going down that road.
Okay, so you've got a mentor as well, then.
Yeah.
Nice.
So you have to, you've gotten some pretty good accolades on this film that you've got out right now, just coming out of the gate. So that has to give you a lot of confidence moving forward in learning this and putting your pitches together. Because you just won a Best Picture at Nice. And
yes, you know, all of those accolades certainly helped me when I went to Cannes. 1 week before the Cannes film market, this film was in the Nice International Film Festival in France and won the award for Best Story. So I'm walking into Cannes saying, hey, here's a film. It just won Best Story at the Nice Film Festival. I'd love to talk to you about it. And people would actually sit down and listen to me. And out of the pitching that I didn't do a lot of pitching, but I did enough and found the distributors that I wanted to find. These two distributors, one was international, based in Australia, and the other one is based in LA. And I found this second one. Well, the first one was been at Cannes 17 years. And he's kind of like the old model of distribution, you know, like the way they used to, the way they buy films. And the other guy is today's version of, you know, distribution company. So I'm dealing with two different worlds. And the guy...
Is the LA one the old one and the Australian the new, or the other way around?
The other way around. The other way around.
Interesting. Okay.
So the LA one, okay, it's the last day of Cannes. I'm walking around just in an area that I hadn't been to yet. It's such a vast arena, multiple pavilions and arenas. And I decided to walk through this one area that I hadn't been, and this guy was sitting at his booth. His booth was still up. Others had taken their booths down. There were posters on the wall. And I could see that he dealt a lot with documentaries just by the posters that were up there. And I went over to him and I said, "Hi, I'm here with a film trying to find an interested, distribution." And he said, "Oh, well, what's it about?" And I give him my little 1 minute line. And he goes, "Well, here, sit down. It sounds interesting." So we talk for half an hour, and I pitch him. I just pitch him on the film and why I think this film would be a great film for his company. All I know is the posters on the wall. Okay, so I see that he's done a music story. I see that he's done some biopics, so I just start. But the main thing that I pitched him on was that this film would fit his niche because it's about how to transform your life.
Okay.
And I said, this is a life-affirming film that asks you, how are you living your life? Look at how this guy lived his life. Look at the way in which he put himself into what he was doing, and how are you doing? What are you doing? Okay. So this guy was really interested in that pitch because I said to him, if we're going to change the world, we have to change ourselves first. We have to have social change on the inside before we can go outside and change the world, and that's what this guy offers. He gives you a look into the world of an artist and how an artist lives his life.
I can attest to what Stephanie is saying because I saw the film. I was one of the privileged few that have seen a screening of it, and it is powerful. And I have to say, and I wrote about it, I put the LinkedIn piece that I wrote about, the review that I wrote on it, is that after seeing that film and hearing his story, it made me want to be a better writer.
Ah, nice.
That's how powerful her film is.
This is exciting. So how do we help tell people about this, or it's not out there? Or
it's out there, and it's the world is big. I do what I can to get the film out there, but I wanted to just end by saying I'm waiting for this guy that I pitched at Cannes to call me back. He was going to watch the film this past week, and he was going to call me by the end of the week. So I'm waiting for him to call and let me know his interest, because of all of the distributors or all of the film sales reps that I met, he would be the one that I would choose, I think.
Nice. So it's about making that connection between yourself and somebody else who has that common vision for getting it out there?
Well, I as one person said, you have to have several things in place.
Yeah.
You have to have a good trailer,
Okay.
and you have to have passion.
Okay.
I think I have all those. I have a great trailer, I have a great poster, and I have great passion. And that comes across when you meet people. You hand them that poster that's exquisite. You tell them they can watch the trailer. The trailer is a wow,
Mhm.
and then they meet you and they see your connection to your film is passionate, and they like that because they know
Okay.
that that's how you got where you got because of your passion, putting it into your film, getting it done, getting it made, getting it funded. It all took passion, and without passion, you can do so little.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. So we end each show with a challenge of the week, and this challenge of the week is for anybody in any kind of, way, shape, or form. Um, but we talked about young people and how, um, how they have. I feel like they've got so much potential in this world. What would you challenge people if you could challenge anyone this week to do anything to move themselves forward into their future? What would it be?
well, I like to tell my students that and I just said this, without passion, you can't do much. I'd say
Mhm.
find your passion, make it happen. Okay, whatever that passion is, find it and make it happen. You know the movie Flashdance? That's
Uh-huh.
what that
Yeah.
movie was about. That movie was about finding your passion and making it happen. And if you don't have that, what are you working for? You're working for security, you're working to pay the rent, you're working to survive. And I'm talking about something beyond that kind of work. I'm talking about work that is a calling, work that calls to you to step out, to take a chance, to
Mm.
persevere, to do something big, bigger than you could dream. And people love meeting people like that who have a dream and a passion and who are carrying it out to the best of their ability. And if you can do that, if you can find your passion, make it happen. Go watch Flashdance again. It's such a great movie. It's such a great message. You'll be inspired. You'll be inspired.
No,
Uh,
that's actually great because you gave us something very wide, but then you gave us something very direct. Go watch Flashdance again. I love it. I love it. And that probably wouldn't have been your answer, maybe, at the beginning of the show. You know what I mean? So it all
yeah,
evolved.
yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to, I really want to thank you because this whole conversation has been really illuminating and extremely invigorating, and I think that a lot of people would benefit from being able to work with you and also to be able to support other artists like yourself. So let me ask you this. What is the best way for people to reach out and connect with you?
Well, here's one of my. I have several posters,
Okay.
but here's one of them. Okay, and I have a website, and they can go to my website. I think that's start. You can
Mm-hmm.
contact me from my website, which is www.thomaschapinfilm.com. thomaschapinfilm.com. You can watch the trailer there,
Okay.
and you can find me there.
Oh, that's great. Okay, great. And are you still crowdfunding at all, or?
No, not yet. It's sort of in the back of my head if I want to, but because I know how hard it is, I'm really thinking about whether or not to go there again, or Now,
Yeah.
whether I get a deal with a sales rep, right, who'd start selling the film, that could mean income. Okay, if they sell the film to
Right.
Germany, jazz is huge in Europe, so to me the target audiences are in Europe. And
Okay.
you can sell a film for a lot of money in these territories of Europe. So that may be where the next big windfall of money will come from, and I don't have to do a Kickstarter. You know, that's a great possibility. And I just think that this film's going to find its destiny. I'm just here to support it and to give it what it needs to fly. It's already flown, I feel, and the more that I just keep focusing on, and that's one more thing we didn't talk about, was this is all I've done for 5 years. All.
Right.
The power of focus. I could write a book about that. There's great power in focusing. And I think that's why this film has gotten to where it's gotten, is because I focused for 5 years on nothing else.
Yeah. Would you be willing to coach others?
Depends, you know. Right now I'm focused on my film.
Okay. Yeah. I understand.
And so at this time, no. But down the line, perhaps. There have been people who have contacted me. I will take a phone call. I will take a meeting in some cases. I will read something, a film description. But I'm not going to jump into any relationship with anyone until I'm done getting this film distributed.
I can understand that. Yeah. Well, Stephanie Castillo, you have been absolutely terrific today, and we wish you great success with Thomas Chapin film.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to seeing it myself. So, thank you for joining us today on Virtual Newsmakers.
It's going to be a pleasure, and I love the questions you asked. I love the discussion that we had, and I hope you too will see it one day on TV. When it's sold, you know, it'll get to where you are.
Definitely. Definitely. Okay, well, stay in touch, and this is today's Virtual Newsmakers, and we look forward to hearing more and learning more about your upcoming distribution as it happens, so please stay in touch.
I will.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. Hold on 1 second. Okay. So I'm going to end out, and next week we'll be back to you with another